Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Commander-in-Chief of the Armored Forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky. During the previous 12 hours he made a lot of very interesting statements about the situation in the area of the conflict. Russia aims to form at least 11 new divisions and recruit 409,000 contract soldiers, says Ukrainian Armored Forces Commander-in-Chief. Also, he added that this year Russia may increase the size of its contingent in the northern military district. He says that last year approximately 406,000 personnel signed contracts with the Russian armed forces. In total, the Russian armed forces have approximately 4.5 million trained reserve soldiers. Another important statement made by Syrsky is that Ukraine will not give Donbas to Putin. I fully support Zelensky. Also, he emphasized that Ukraine will conduct offensive operations. You won't achieve victory on the defensive. So Syrsky is trying to tell us that in coming days or weeks we are going to see another offensive operation carried out by the armed forces of Ukraine. As of now, it's very difficult to understand where exactly Syrsky is going to counterattack, but there are not so many options. He doesn't have a lot of options for this. Of course, he can, first of all, and of course, he can continue his counter-offensive operation in the area of the city of Kupiansk. And by the way, several mappers adjusted their maps in this area, showing as if the Ukrainians managed to restore complete control over every single square kilometer that was captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation during their summer-autumn offensive operation. So as you can see, most of the territories, according to different mappers, were recaptured by Ukrainians. But at the same time, we continue receiving updates that show us completely different situation. For example, in this video, we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the southern part of the settlement of Peshane, which shows that most likely not every single square kilometer was recaptured by the armed forces of Ukraine. Anyway, we still believe that the situation in the city of Kupiansk and its agglomeration is still covered with the fog of war, but we believe that in 1 or 2 weeks the situation will be completely revealed. So this is one of the options where Ukrainians continue their counter-offensive operation. The second area where Ukrainians can carry out an offensive operation is, of course, the Transnistria region. So I would like to remind you that since the beginning of the special military operation, the situation here remains very tense, and sometimes we discuss the situation in this region due to, let's say, additional actions from both Ukrainian and Moldovan sides. So this is a possible area where Ukrainians can begin some special operation or even offensive operation. Now let's move further. According to the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, during the previous night, the Russians used 145 drones to attack through the territory of Ukraine, and the Ukrainians are saying that they managed to bring down 126 drones. So the Russians continue preparing themselves before the beginning of a very massive attack through the territory of Ukraine using hundreds of drones, maybe even thousands of drones, and dozens of missiles. And for example, today we received a report that the Russians continue improving their launching site in the area of the city of Donetsk. New high-resolution satellite imagery of Donetsk International Airport shows continued expansion of Russia's grand drone launch point there. Three new static launch pads have been installed in the last months, bringing the total number of launchers there to 7 pieces. So according to these updates, this means that the total number of drones that can be stored, not including larger storage facilities, is 174. So the Russians continue improving their drone launching infrastructure around the territory of Ukraine, trying to create the situation when Russia will be able to attack Ukraine with thousands of drones. And for example, this was also confirmed and stated by the president of Ukraine, Zelensky. So now let's discuss the situation in the ground. During the previous 12 hours, we received lots of very interesting updates along the line of combat contact. And first, let's talk about the Odessa region, where the Russians continue intensifying their offensive operation in the region. During the previous 12 hours, we received updates from almost every single front line in this area. The first one and the most important one is the second defense layer of the city of Sumy. We are talking about the territory between the villages of Khotin and Novosich. During the previous 12 hours, we received lots of videos from this area of how Russians were attacking vehicles, equipment, and soldiers of the armed forces of Ukraine that that arrived in this area. It seems, according to this video and according to number of vehicles that were destroyed during the previous days, we believe that Ukrainians are trying to reinforce this defense layer because the Ukrainians expect that the Russians are going to launch an offensive operation in this direction in coming days or maybe even hours. So that is why the Ukrainians are bringing more and more forces. They're taking buildings, they're preparing their positions. So most likely in coming days, very heavy clashes are going to take place in this area. At the same time, the Russians intensify their offensive operation from the east of the city of Sumy. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded around the villages of Magritsa. So these are the changes on the ground that were provided by neutral mappers. The Russians are about to enter the huge Sumy forest, and under the protection of trees, Russians can continue offensive operation, and they will continue offensive operation towards the city of Sumy itself. At the same time, the Russians intensified their offensive operation around the settlement of Miropolye. So during the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded, and these are the changes on the ground between the dates. As you can see, the Russians currently are trying to cut this pocket and to get the eastern outskirts of the settlement of Miropolye and to begin assault operation there as well. And we received a video from the settlement of Vysoka. This is a new front line that was opened by the armed forces of the Russian Federation several weeks ago, and here we can see a video of how Ukrainians were attacking Russian soldiers with FPV drones. So the Russians are getting more and more soldiers in this direction, trying to concentrate a critical mass, and then using this critical mass, the Russians may try to continue offensive operation further in the western direction, in the northern direction towards the village of Popovka, and in the western southwestern directions towards the village of Ryasna and Taraturne. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Kharkiv direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded as well. Pro-Russian sources are saying that as a result of clashes, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Gravskaya. Several mappers suggested their maps, and several pro-Russian sources confirmed this situation. So probably today the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, or maybe tomorrow, will confirm additional progress on the ground from the Russian side in this region. Furthermore, the sources report that the Russians began assault operation in the territory of the settlement of Semyonovka. So we see that the Russians continue advancing along the huge Kharkiv forest from the city of Volchansk along the river of Seversky Donetsk in the southern direction, trying to cut the main logistic of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Bilokolodezny direction. We have already discussed the situation in the city of Kupiansk. Once again, according to neutral mappers, the Ukrainians have almost recaptured completely the territory they lost during the Russian counter-offensive operation, and at the same time we continue receiving updates that confirm that the Russians are still there and that they still control huge territories. So very complicated and very weird situation. Now let's move further. As for the Slaviansk direction, just small changes on the ground were recorded in the area of the city of Siversk. So these are the changes. According to neutral mappers, the Russians improved their positions and they continue their offensive operation further in the western direction. As for the city of Konstantinovka, during the previous 12 hours, we just received lots of videos along the line of combat contact that confirm that the current situation is the exact situation along the line of combat contact. So in this video, we can see how Ukrainians attacked a Russian soldier that was moving in this area. That confirms the Russian control over the territory. And we had another video published from the area of the settlement of Stepanovka, the same story. The Russians were moving through this dense network of the fortifications under very heavy fire of FPV drones of the armed forces of Ukraine. Now let's discuss the situation in the Dobropolye direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. Several pro-Russian sources stated that as a result of clashes, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Novodonbass. So, if this information is correct, of course, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm this information as well. And if this information is correct, once again, the distance between the settlement of Novodonbass and the settlement of Dobropolye is already less than 4 kilometers, which means that from these positions the Russians may try to continue offensive operation further and to start sending first sabotage and reconnaissance group with the purpose to infiltrate the city of Dobropolye and to establish complete control over the eastern part of the settlement. As for the Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 12 hours, the sources confirmed that there are still very heavy clashes between the settlements of Zaliznichny and Gulay-Polye. The Russians are trying to break through Ukrainian defense, but at the same time we see that Ukrainians are still holding their lines. As for the western Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded in the area of the settlement of Primorskaya. These changes were made based on the video published by Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians with FPV drones while they were moving in the area of the settlement. So based on this video, we have adjusted the map. So this is the situation by the end of the 18th, and this is the situation by the end of the 19th of January of 2026. Furthermore, another important thing, as we discussed at the beginning of the video, the Russians attacked this territory of Ukraine during the previous 12 hours, and we received some videos from different areas. So this is the video that was published from the Odessa region, and here we can see a very heavy duel between Russian drones and the air defense system of the armed forces of Ukraine. So the sources reported that the Russians were attacking the Odessa region, and lots of explosions, as you can see, were recorded. Furthermore, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, stated that the Russians are planning to launch a massive attack within the next 48 hours. This is going to be a very powerful attack from the Russian side. And furthermore, this morning we started receiving reports that the Russians began bombing and attacking the city of Kharkiv with Iskander missiles. So I would like to remind you that according to the latest updates, there are very huge problems with energy supply. There are power outages, and that's happened as a result of Russian Iskander attacks. During the previous probably 10 days, the Russians used more than 20 missiles of this type, and today the Russians began bombing the city once again. So it seems that there are no chances for the Ukrainian authorities to restore a normal life in this area. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.